All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of Dead Nation. I love that the campaign is coming to an end because now we have a normal sort of cycle of interesting interviews, and we don't have to just gossip about each other. It's going to be really good, and this is a space-themed episode. Awesome! I love space. Getting into space. We have a special guest, John Kurtz. You have been to space.
Hi, Steele. How you doing?
You're a veteran of space.
I'm disappointed, though. I thought we were here to gossip about each other, so I'm getting off now. And I'm like, I actually wanted to get on the show and gossip about that John Carrots candidate. Yeah, that's the one I wanted to gossip about. You know, I can tell you some dirt on him, but no, I'm sorry. Yeah, we're going to talk about space today.
No. Tell us the dirt on this John Carrots character. I mean, I want to hear all the dirt. I want to know. I want to know what he's up to.
You have to read his memoirs. The second edition of his autobiography.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you'll find out. How he was Lawrence of Arabia of Asia.
You have one of those autobiographies written by my son and tell the true story. You know what I mean?
and we have Ben Zion here. Hey Ben, how are you going? How are you feeling? Are you ready to talk about space?
I am absolutely ready to talk about space, and I'm ready to hear John Carrots, who has a lot more real-world experience than I do. I'm just kind of tapping the keyboard talking about this stuff, but it's incredible to be able to kind of relive that with somebody like this. So I'm excited to do this. Yeah.
I got some breaking news as well. I just got a message from Gennady. He said he's willing to let the winner. He's going to fund himself. He's going to let the winner go up in a MiG into space. So whoever's got it, Gennady, you're on the hook for a bill there. No, it's all good.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure they're doing that again right now. I know last time I saw, I'm not sure they are doing it, but just be prepared. That's all I can say. I was going to come back down and have some vodka, and I'm not a non-drinker, but I ended up sleeping for 3.5 hours because I did have a little bit of a headache. But
yeah,
I did fly back to Moscow though. But they said some people would not fly back. They would actually take the train back, because of feeling sick after being on the jet.
Yeah, the last train to Munich. It's good. There's a proliferation of space themed movies nowadays. I mean, Star Wars, Star Trek, The Martian, talking about Interstellar, talking about time. There's a whole bunch of them. They're all popping up because it's. I mean, the 20th century there was a lot of talk about space. They got excited because of the moon landing and because of in the latter half, after Sputnik, and then there was the moon landing, and then there was the shuttle. So space has been something on people's minds, but actively now it looks like we're talking about Mars again. That wasn't something on the radar. So people are getting excited about space again. Because early in this century, we were just sending satellites up, and it's like the space station is pretty cool. Like, people like the space station. They're running lots of tests up there, but it's not Mars. It's not habitable places on the moon, and so it's getting popularized, and people like Elon Musk are energizing the space. So I guess my first point of order is are you guys just part of this new excited cadre of people who are just ready to go to space, or have you always been space fans since you discovered it?
I've been a space fan since I was a kid. I mean, I'm an old fart, so I liked Star Trek. I think is the main thing I can remember. But actually, even before Star Trek, there was Lost in Space, which started out more serious. If anybody watches the first couple episodes where it's in black and white, and Dr. Smith is actually mean and evil, but it was kind of interesting, And so I think that started for me as a kid. And then Star Trek. I mean, Star Trek was wagon wheels in space, the way they ran that. So it made it. Because in the 60s, you got to remember, it was Bonanza and High Chaparral and all those kind of shows. Can't think of what some of the other shows were called, but there were a lot of Westerns. So they made Captain Kirk out to be like a gunfighter. He'd go down into the planet and, he'd have shoot-ups and stuff and fist fights. And it was kind of a Western in space. And that made it interesting, plus the peace and, but it seemed like it made our society more of a utopia in the future and something to look forward to. And I very much enjoyed that, and it was something to look forward to. And we also talk about here about taking man to the next level, and they had a couple episodes in space in Star Trek where man has progressed to the aliens have progressed past the body and they're energy beings, and that's kind of an interesting way to think of where we could evolve to, and those energy beings wanted to build robot bodies to house their intelligence and their essence, and just interesting thing to think of today where we're going also. And it's amazing. To me, it's kind of been disappointing. Back in the 60s, we thought by this time we'd already have colonized Mars and be there. I mean, we thought the year 2000 would be phenomenal. I mean, look at the old movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things back then that pushed me. I'm sorry, I'm kind of hogging it.
That's good. So, no, that's good. So, you mentioned 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in that movie, there was the idea of the obelisk, and the monkeys discovered the obelisk, which accelerated their intelligence and their curiosity, and that's what pushed the space frontier. So I'll ask Ben, when was your obelisk moment? Have you always been interested in space, or is it something you're just getting into because of Elon Musk?
Yeah, well, oddly enough, that film did have that kind of impact on me, and I think we could talk a lot about the role of media in not just shaping our imaginations, but really as a driver of thinking realistically about these things and building these things. I think there's a lot of ways in which we don't do that. In people like Elon Musk, for example, they're trying to gain purchase for the next moonshot, the next $1 trillion money pit. Which I do regard the original moonshot to be something of that kind, extraordinarily expensive. It's one interpretation is that it was an extraordinarily expensive publicity stunt, and a lot of things that the very conversation that we're having at this moment was perhaps made possible by much of the technology that derived from that. But still, $1 trillion is a lot of money, so I worked very closely with a gentleman, Nikolai Agapov, and his team on a prospectus for a partial space elevator, and it's a whole hour we could do on that. But I think that near-Earth industrialization and business is a little bit more important than convincing people to spend a lot of money on going to Mars. I think that we have to kind of be inspired, but also be actually doing the better things that we can do.
This is the great thing about the USTP is once we get a leader, I mean, we'll be able to send those people to NASA and actually, talk and interact with officials and people at NASA, and that'll be really good. I mean, they'll obviously other projects as well, Neuralink and Neuralace and emerging tech, green technology and all these other things. But it'll be exciting because, hopefully we'll have access to, people at NASA, and we can talk about that sort of stuff. Now, the space race in the 20th century was born out of the Cold War, right? I mean, you had Sputnik. Right. And it freaked the Americans out. It was in 1957. And then in 1958, the Americans were like, well, that was intense. Let's form NASA. And then the Russians did it again. I mean, the Soviets did it again. And they got Yuri up there in space in 1961. They also got some dog. I think they got a dog up there or something. But the first humans on the moon, 1969, that really started to change everything, and that like I had David Wood on, and he said we went to the moon to discover the moon, and we discovered Earth, or something along those lines. How important was the moon landing, John Kurtz?
Well, it was important. I'm from the days when they let us out of school to see that. As a matter of fact, the day that they walked on the moon. And I've met Buzz working with the Explore Mars organization, and he is a character. He's enjoyable to talk to. But back in my day, they would either, for the moonwalk day, they actually let us out of school to stay home to watch it. But I remember for a lot of the other flights, they would actually stop class and they'd bring the TV into the classroom. Back those days, you had big huge TVs on big carts they had to push around. It wasn't like the flat screens of today's. And they would actually stop class for us to see some of these events. So it was quite a big deal back then, and it was a big deal to everybody. And a lot of it, of course, was us trying to outdo the Russians, because that was the person that was our big enemy. I think a lot of times man has to have someone that they view as their opponent to make them have goals to work to something. I'm not always sure how real and partially perceived sometimes that is, but that was a big rallying goal and helped rally a lot of people, and it was very important, very enjoyable to see. Something I did want to get back to, though, here quick that we mentioned was as far as I do work with the National Space Organization, National Space Organization and Society, and I go down to Capitol Hill, and there are 3 things that we've been pushing lately, and the main thing is space commerce, space colonization, and also a satellite that is between, I believe it's towards around where Venus is, to watch towards the Earth, so we can actually see anything coming from behind us, like meteors or asteroids or something that might be an issue to our planet. So, and these are all built into existing bills. So there is bills out there now for space colonization and commercialization and trade in space. And those are things that are being worked on. They're just not necessarily talked to openly to the public, it seems to me, which is kind of interesting. And I'm kind of jumping here, but something that was also interesting to me within the past couple of weeks is when the government released videos of unidentified flying objects. Of course, they don't call them UFOs, they called them something else, UF something. And it was surprising to me that it was on the national news and clips and stuff, but yet nobody seemed to care about it. It was kind of like, why don't they care about it? It's like they're more concerned about, oh, let's impeach Trump. But hey, they just released videos of unidentified flying objects that they admit to the fact were unidentified, and they couldn't find an excuse for them. It's like, that was interesting to me.
Yeah. So
I wanted to have candidate Harris on this show because he has done some interesting pieces on some of these similar subjects. He became unavailable at the last moment, but let's stay in touch, buddy. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredibly fascinating stuff. Please go on, Steve.
Okay, so like the psychology of people walking on the moon was fundamental in my mind, because it's an expression of our innate nature to explore, and all these other things you mentioned about space commerce, national security issues, because like industrialization of space and exploration. I mean, but they all breathe off the point of that moonwalk. I think that moonwalk really laid the foundation of everything that we think about space, mostly because it really shows us. I mean, transhumanists, right? They want to go beyond their physical body, but we actually got our bodies up there in that circumstance, and for me that's pretty cool. I mean, we drag these things to something that's totally alien, an alien location, and I think that really for transhumanists and for humans as well, I think that really like opened up a new psychology of where we can push our physical limits, and it makes mind uploading less scary. It makes a lot of things less scary because it's like, if we can walk on the moon, these sort of ape creatures can go up there and do that amazing thing, then we can do anything. And I think all these other things that you're talking about is important. But the psychology was foundationally laid, I think, when we did that. And look, and I don't entertain this idea, that there was fake moon landing or anything like that. I think I don't do that. But regardless, even if it was, it achieved the same effect. The impact has been momentous. So hypothetically, it was faked. I mean, that doesn't matter. I mean, the point is that we discovered that we can do stuff anyway. But it actually happened, and that was great. It's just an Arthur C. Clarke quote about, any sufficiently advanced technology or achievement in that case looks like magic. And, when people look at the advanced technology that we have today, they say, oh, how could they do it back then with less computing power? It's like, how could they look back at aqueducts in the Roman Empire and they don't know how to build them, or maybe they do, but they say, wow, that's pretty cool for that type of civilization, or the pyramids, and they say aliens must have helped. I mean, you got to give humans some credit where credit's due. We can achieve stuff on our own, regardless of. It doesn't have to. I think this is true. We can achieve stuff on our own. Maybe there was some intelligent life that came down and helped us build the pyramids, but I'd like to think we achieved it on our own. I think that would be a much better story, for our own intelligence to build a pyramid, or to walk on the moon, or to build aqueducts and colosseums. And I mean, I don't like to just think that that we don't achieve this sort of stuff. And when you look into the future, as transhumanists or whatever. It's nice to think that we'd be able to build an AI that's benevolent, or it's nice to be able to upload our minds in a safe context, and we actually achieved that on our own. Yeah, maybe we invented AI that assisted us, but we built that AI. We are the creators and innovators of that. So I think the moon walk was totally mind-changing in the psychology of where and how and what we can do as people. And it's just in the same way as these previous explorers who got on these rickety old boats, like Captain Cook or others, and they redefined
Columbus.
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's a bit of controversy around here, but they redefined
Eric the Red, how about that?
Yeah, they redefined the Viking. They redefined what the limits of what we can do, and I mean we're doing it again, and by sending a Mars rover, I mean that's even better. I mean it's an extension of us. I mean it's something that's an extension of us. So I think the moon landing, Ben, how did the moon landing have an impact on you?
Well, I wasn't born yet. I will say that basically my earliest memory of anything space related was watching the Challenger explosion live, and that maybe that does inform to some degree my my idea that we should focus on space business rather than spacefaring as a goal in and of itself. But yes, what you were saying about these this pioneer notion here, and what you were saying a moment before that. We are at the point, quite nearly at the point, like we see in this Netflix film, The Titan, where we have the possibility of gene therapy or germline engineering, bioengineering human extremophiles who wouldn't just immediately die upon traveling to another place. And that might be something that might be entirely feasible in just a few short years. And we're in the pre-CRISPR era. We weren't able to do that sort of thing, but we are kind of seeing some takeoffs there. It's an interesting set of ideas. It's hard to know how to approach this sort of thing in terms of whether these should be private initiatives. I think most people are pretty skeptical of spending public funds of the scale that were used in the 60s and 70s today. But there's, I think, reasonable people can disagree on some of this.
All right, so that makes sense, John. So you mentioned you're working intimately with a space organization. So let's go through each of these goals. List them one by one. Let's talk about goal one. So what's goal one?
Well, the three things we've been pushing, going to Capitol Hill pushing, is colonization, industry and business in space, and also a space satellite that watches backwards from the sun backwards to Earth to watch for any meteorites or asteroids that might be coming to attack Earth.
Let's start with
not to attack, but
let's start with that one.
know.
So explain this notion of space security.
Well, that's basically it. It's security. It's putting up a satellite in orbit, but it's orbit towards the sun, looking backwards, so that we can watch for anything coming close to the Earth and a potential problem, which could also have military reasoning also, But that's one of the things, and there's bills out there pushing all three of these things that are not, I mean, if you research it, you can find them, but it's not something that they talk about to the public, and there's a lot more going on. The thing that interests me the most is the politicians that are most interested in it deal with states that do a lot of space already. Florida is very interested. Alabama, which has Rocket City there, they call it Rocket City, is interested. Texas is interested. The states that already have a lot of business doing space-related things, they are interested in these things because it is business for their state and money for their state in the long run. Some of the states that don't, they kind of like the idea, but they're not really going to be big pushers of it. But those are things that, my point in bringing that up is that's things that the populace doesn't know right offhand that they're pushing right now and that there's bills for. And I only know it from being in the National Space Society.
Sure.
Hey,
so how does continuing this this theme of space security? I mean, Trump essentially brought in the Space Force, which is
right.
The weaponization and the militarization of space, space-based weapons. Declaring that it's a but before that, even under George Bush, which I find remarkable. I mean, America had declared through the United Nations space as sort of an open forum of science and exploration and industrialization and colonization and all these other things. And then now Trump has said, well, hang on, that's America's sovereign territory up there. To protect vital satellites, communication, GPS, global communication systems, and weapon systems, and all these other systems, including the International Space Station, which is a joint effort by different state actors, and whatever else they've got going on there, including commercial projects, such as the Starlink, which is Elon Musk's thing. What do you think about this move with the Space Force, Mr. Kirks? What do you think? You like it? Do you think that space is a place?
I like it because it's getting us towards space. But I have a couple things here. I don't think once our government moves into space, other governments are going to want to move into space because they're not going to want to be represented. Yeah, I can't talk today. But they want to be able to be up there watching us watch them also, and to watch us. So it's a matter of everybody's going to want to be up there to watch us, which at first it's not the reason I'd like us to be in space or to go there, but I look at it as the reason it's probably going to get us there. We're probably going to get it there because of military, it looks like right now. And that can be a good thing in the long run. As long as someone's going there, I think it's going to develop. And they get on the moon. If they build more military bases on the moon, they're going to have to use more technology to do things. They're going to get companies involved. It's going to become space commerce and other things. You're going to have civilian workers working on things and stuff. So I think it is a good move, although I would rather it be for other reasons. Let me put it that way.
What do you think of?
I'll play the devil's.
Yeah, what do you think of Space Force, Trump, all this?
I'll tend to play the devil's advocate on that as well. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration did all manner of things that would be regarded as not adhering to this international waters principle in space, and that the Cold, whatever you might think about the Cold War, that it was itself kind of a sham operation. But we are at a different point in history now. One where a high level of connectivity and a high level, I mentioned in our last talk the Ellie Laser Yudkowsky Moore's laws of mad science. this kind of thing, a high level does maybe give us some idea of what we should have some kind of security. And I'm not terribly enthused that the United States should be the center of that, but it is something that we have to consider for near Earth as well. We should have somebody looking out to make sure that an EMP pulse doesn't destroy all the satellites that are keeping the world running. So,
yeah.
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something interesting. Back in the '80s, after Trump had come out with his book, what was it, The Art of the Deal? I had written him a letter suggesting that maybe he'd be interested in being the first person to build a space hotel or a hotel on the moon. And I did get a real nice letter back from his assistant with gold raised letters saying, right now it's not something that we're interested in or going that way money-wise, but I actually sent that to Trump back then because he had done the book about how he loves the art of the deal and moving into areas other people didn't. And it's kind of funny to me now he's the president and he is pushing that, but for military reasons. I have also met the man at Studio 54 already, so it's kind of funny. But so I did try to push space things to him back in the 80s. So it's kind of interesting to me.
I've had this conversation with people a little bit similar to this, talking about, so sometime around 1961, Yuri, what's his name? The first man, the first spacewalk. Gagarin. Yes, Yuri Gagarin goes to space. And so the United States is saying, we have the money to do something like this. We have to counter this. What are we going to do? Let's make a list. The moonshot is the first thing. But industrialization efforts were part of that conversation. And had we used that $1 trillion on something like this, I believe we might very well have something rather akin to a space hotel today.
Okay, so Dr. Robert Zubrin, and I've tried tons of times to get him on the show. I might go through Isaac Arthur because he's pretty busy because he's hanging out with Elon Musk at the Mars Society over there. I've tried, and I'm going to keep trying. But he talks about the space shuttle project as being the worst thing ever for space progress, simply because they had the Saturn V rocket. And they could have just made a ton of them. It's the biggest, best rocket that they had at that point. They just had to put money into basically non-reusable rockets, and it was fine. I mean, that rocket was designed essentially by the German team from Operation Paperclip and all that sort of stuff, and it was a rocket that was capable of getting us to Mars, to the moon easily, and to Mars actually. And then they put their money, they switched gears, and they said, we need a reusable rocket. And so they switched gears to the space shuttle, and it just ended up being a huge money sink, a huge waste of time, and a huge mess that didn't end up fulfilling its purpose. Now, looking back, I don't blame them for trying to get a reusable rocket like the space shuttle. I mean, the space shuttle flew, 200 missions or something. I mean, I get it. I mean, if you're in NASA and you've just invested so many billions out of JFK from JFK or whatever, and it's like, hey, we need to cut this cost down because we've been to the moon 13, 14 times or whatever. People are getting bored of it. You're going to have to come up with other budgetary constraints because we're not bringing back, huge amounts of usable science that's stimulating the economy by its GDP metric of quadrillions. Well, therefore, we're going to have to find something reusable. And I kind of understand that notion. Then they said, all right, well, if we make a reusable rocket like the space shuttle, it'll be all good. And you end up with Challenger, like Ben Zion witnessed, and then you end up with problems. But yeah, Robert Zubrin, he said it was probably the worst move. Not obviously it's progress, but it was a bad move in the context of getting us somewhere. And we might have had reusable rockets. Like something out in 2015, like the Elon Musk's Falcon, a lot earlier, because they might have just continued to plug away with the Saturn V and said, hey, if it part breaks off, maybe we can bring that down, and like they were trying to do with the space shuttle. So it's kind of an interesting notion, that whole thing. It's kind of It's kind of interesting. John, you were talking about you're okay with the weaponization of space. Can you just expand on that?
Well, it wasn't the fact that I said I was okay with it. I just said that I'm happy that they're moving to space, even if it's for the wrong reason. Lots of time man does things. I think sometimes man quite often does the right thing for the wrong reason. And I think going to space for watching each other in military is the wrong reason, but I'm glad they're going to space because it's going to lead to other things. I'm disappointed that we haven't already lead. I think I would rather have us have gone to space for greed, trying to maybe mine the asteroid belt and stuff, which I know there are companies that set up for doing that, but they're just not far enough along to do it. I would rather that be what we're pushing than military, but I'm glad that we're pushing something. I'm glad that there's going to be a move towards that. We're supposed to be there now, 2024, which is the ideal date that they're setting. And then there's also, for Mars, the date that's supposed to be ideal is 2033 because of the closeness of both our orbits, which makes it ideal for a 2-year trip, to Mars, there at Mars and back in 2 years because of how the orbits line up. So I'm hoping that having us go to the moon for military will then put some things there. Naturally, we don't normally want to go necessarily to the moon and then to Mars, but if we build other things in space that's going to make it easier to do that and do that jump, I'm for it. Like I said, I wish it was for other reasons than military, but I'm happy we're finally doing it. Because I remember in the 60s when we thought we'd be there by now. We'd be there living on Mars by now, and I feel we're kind of behind the game. I don't know what really happened. We just kind of dropped the ball.
Oh, that's really interesting. So somebody who I'll just bring her up on screen here, Dr. Jane Poitier. So the reason I know this lady is because of something called the Biosphere Project, which is something I fell in love with a long time ago. And it's really cool. And she was one of the people that went in and explored, went in as an explorer, and she locked herself in this Biosphere Project for 2 years. And I really enjoyed that project and fell in love with that project. And she launched a company because there's different ways of getting into space, and she's actually launched a company. I'm in contact with her sometimes. I'm hoping I can get her on the show here, and if I do, I'll bring you along, John Kurtz. But Jane Pontier, she has launched a balloon company because she says there's
balloons can go up high.
Yeah, there's space. We'll get into, because this is where we're going with this, Ben Zion. So prep your space and industrial elevator topic, because there's balloons potentially. There's reusable rockets. There's a space elevator, and there's Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, which is a sort of hybrid plane thing. There's multiple ways. But Ben Zion, you're into the big space elevator, carbon nanotubes, all that cool stuff. Talk about because people on the project. I mean, Japan, right?
Certainly familiarized myself with their work. The state of material science is not such that in 2020 we can build a full length space elevator. We could build a partial space elevator that would facilitate building out infrastructure in Earth orbit and ultimately facilitate industrialization on our nearest neighbor, the moon. But there's the prospects of building this, as you mentioned. There are companies that have done the good work, and as we move forward with the material sciences, the carbon nanotube that has that strength to go that full length. We want to see that happen. There's a lot of interesting approaches. I like this Jane Poitier discussion. I'll be looking forward to watching that show.
Yeah, I really want to get her on. I'll bring you on, John, if I can get her. She's very busy.
Thank you. That would be nice.
Yeah, she's busy, but we've been talking for years because of her adventure through the Biosphere project, and then when she launched the space balloon company, she sort of went dark because she's so busy. But but John, so which one are you a fan? Are you a fan of? How are you a fan? Because the biggest cost getting us through the atmosphere, like getting us up off the planet. Are you a fan of reusable rockets, balloons? Virgin Galactic, a mixture of these obviously a mix, but what it really excites you? I mean, a space industrial elevator is still science fiction, but they're making progress. What really excites you about the lift?
I guess I would totally like it. I would like reusable. I kind of like what Virgin Galactic's doing. I know the effects of the G's and how that feels on you from going up in the Meg 29. I think it depends on what we're using it for. If we're using it to put things into space quickly and to get things built, I think some form of reusable rocket would probably be better. I think for people going up and doing it as tourism or going at a slower pace to go visit something, I think more like the galactic idea is better, because if you do it a little bit more gradual, it's a little easier on you as far as the G's. Now, I've talked to some people about that, about how they want to make the seats backwards and make them that they give more with you so you don't feel it. But I mean, the G's is a big effect, and especially for someone that's not trained. The balloons is an interesting idea. I've rode in hot air balloons, and I do know that they can go up towards the edge of space themselves. It's a very capable thing. And that is an interesting idea, if there'd be some way to get things higher and then maybe even lift off from there. Maybe build a platform that's lifted by balloons, and then you can take off further there. When you're further up in a thinner air atmosphere, it's a little easier to get going and stuff because you're already up there. That might be interesting. I have seen some stuff on the space elevators. They're in Space City in Alabama. They have Rocket City in Alabama. They do have in the museum. They have a little simulation of a space elevator, which is kind of nice. So I would say probably a mixture depending on what you're doing. I think it's like today when we travel in many different ways. I think we're going to find that different kinds of traveling is going to be suitable for different things. I think what Virgin Galactic is looking at is going to be a more pleasant route, probably with less G's on people wanting to do sightseeing. But yet I think regular rockets or the renewable rockets are going to be better for getting things out there into space faster. I do like some of the ideas with the balloons, and I do also like the space elevator things. But like I said, I think it's going to be a combination.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the best way to view it.
It's going to be a combination. They're going to serve different purposes, and I think eventually the space elevator will probably win, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything in the context that they all do serve different purposes. Now, you can get across the world on a boat, or you can jump on a plane. I mean, if you're going to send a car, I mean, you're not going to put a car on a plane unless you're the Saudi prince or something. So yeah, exactly. They serve different purposes, but they do. And I do agree with you. I mean, if Richard Branson can do with what they did with planes, I mean, anyone here can jump on an aircraft. In China, the social credit system, can't just jump on an aircraft anymore. But anyone here, we can just go out. You can purchase a ticket. You can jump on a plane, just like you can. I just call them sky buses. I mean,
yeah, there you go.
Giant sky bus, right? But you can. It's just this notion of just getting on a plane and going to another destination, like any other travel method, is just so almost commonplace nowadays. If he can do that methodology, that commercial context, that continuous customer, demand cycle. I mean, you can do that in space. I mean, you are talking about a bright future. I mean that is going to be incredible. The thing about the balloons are a low cost way of getting things up to space now, quite cheaply. And I think what Jane maybe they'll move into with the balloons is probably, I mean, yes, satellites are good for things like internet, like you might see the balloons being used more as research and for low Earth EMF waves and research things in topography, topography analyzers, and used by cities, municipalities, and cities and things to analyze high tech stuff. I think they're probably going to serve more of a research focus inbuilt task, which you can do with satellites, but sometimes satellites aren't as efficient in that area, and you can conduct low atmosphere tests. For example, the White Rabbit project coming out by CERN, they'll probably be done through balloons as opposed to satellites, because you can't get the speed efficiencies from the internet through the satellite with that project. So stuff like that. Ben, So what wound up? So with Kurt's, your other topic was industrialization of space. Yes, so that's mining asteroids. That's mining moon rocks. That's what else is that? Let's talk about the industrialization of space. That's moon bases.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different things that we haven't even thought of yet. I mean, ideally, when they go to the moon, they will be able to build concrete and bricks and stuff out of the moon soil itself, not be hauling stuff there. So that's going to be new technology, and there might be what I think of that too is there might be things we find in the moon that we can mine and use back here on Earth, and there might be new methods of doing things that we learn that can come back here and help us technology-wise on Earth.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ben?
Well, there's a lot of things that hold near-term promise besides bringing materials back to Earth. There's solar arrays that can be placed into orbit that would contribute to the energy singularity that our friend Jose Cordero we've talked about. There's the data sort of singularity, so to speak, putting these satellites into orbit that are beaming effectively free data to the world around. These are things that we should be really already doing right now. And something like the Agapov orbital lift, it allows us to use the technologies that you described, the technologies that John Carrick's has experienced, not requiring us to have a rocketry that escapes Earth's gravity, getting us up there, then have a third of that distance covered by this space elevator, getting some of those construction materials and useful materials and drones up there and be doing this work more quickly. This is the idea of this kind of design, and the Agapov orbital lift is not the cost is not measured in the billions or tens of billions of dollars as other space elevators are. It would be $100 to $500 million to build this drone entity that would lower the cost of rocketry and industrialization in the near term. We should be building this now.
Well, since that's all you need, I'll cut you a check now. Okay, how's that?
Yeah, well, like for the USTP as well. Like I've been trying. They've been doing a lot of tests at the moment, but there is a small startup that's just taking on some of the big boys. It's called Firefly Aerospace, and I've been trying to get them on the show, but they've been actually in the middle of doing a bunch of engine startups, engine tests, and stuff like that. So they're in America. I mean, for the USTP, I can reach out to these guys for you, and whoever's the winner, go along to these guys. There's a few of these small startups, but they're a friend of the show. They've just had no time and no budget to talk to us at the moment, but they are a friend of the show. Firefly Aerospace. These guys are great. I mean, these guys are pioneering new forms of engine technology, which is reducing the cost, essentially cutting it in thirds of lift of the energy expended on initial lift. So it's like this space thing is awesome. I mean, I'm really into space thing, and and I think like. on the whole, I think what Elon Musk is doing, I think he's probably, his theme. I mean, he went to war with Jack Ma, the CEO of Baba. Is it Alibaba, right? The Amazon alternative over there in China. And he went to war with him because, right at the end of one of their speeches, when they were having a debate, Jack Ma said, death is okay, because they got onto mind uploading and they got on that. And Jack Ma said death is okay. And Elon said, no, consciousness, don't let that go out of the universe. Let the light live on. And I think fundamentally, Elon Musk cares about consciousness, and I think that's why he pushes the Mars colonization thing, because he does want a multiplanetary species. He's scared of AI. He's one of these. And so what I think his grand strategy is, apart from the fact of securing consciousness on becoming multiplanetary, I think his other strategy is this industrialization of space, where commercialization of space, where he can use the space infrastructure to generate the money to create safe AI, because I think the safe AI route is a much more of a sinkhole of cash than the space idea is a much more guaranteed way of making money than safe AI is. I think safe AI, it has prospects, but also it's more of a philanthropic thing. I mean, it's more of philanthropy on that part, and everybody big, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, everybody who knows anything about AI, they're all worried about AI. They're all worried about AI takeoff. They're all worried about superintelligence. They're all worried about Terminator-style scenarios. These people are Bill Gates and are not silly. They're fundamentally worried about it. And I think the space thing from Elon Musk, for example, is a money-making ploy in order to protect us from AI. That's just a random conspiracy theory that I'm throwing out there. What do you guys think about that?
Well, these PayPal Mafia guys made a great show of talking about for 15 years how everybody needs to be moving fast and breaking things. And now that perhaps there's on the verge of having advanced algorithm on the order of a master key that might be able to move fast and break their things, now they're very concerned that this could be potentially an existential risk. I mean, I have to say that I think that that's about their bottom line more than safety for the human race. I think that these kind of breakthroughs will get us off-world more quickly. I also think that going off-world in the next 100 years, whatever difficulties we're going to see, would be a lot safer for us to be doing some kind of biosphere thing near Earth or on Earth, be doing some kind of other planning than the idea that everybody's going to follow the great Moses to Mars on a big, huge ship in the next 30, 40 years. That's I don't think that's really realistically looking at this timeline. But there's certainly other things that we're, I think, more realistically going to be doing.
John, you're an explorer in your own right. Could you imagine living in space? Could you imagine, humans conducting life? I mean, even mundane things, eating, drinking, sleeping, procreating.
Well, we won't talk about the last one, but yeah, I could see us doing that. I think it's in human nature to want to spread out, and I think talking about Elon Musk, I think his idea is for man to expand out, Mars, Moon. I think the moon's going to happen, especially if we go to Mars. It's like one of those things. If we go to Mars, we're definitely going to be on the moon. It's just going to happen along with that, one way or the other. And I think the idea there is, if as man expands, it also gives us a better chance of surviving if we screw up. I mean, especially if we screw up this planet. But I've said before in talks I've had, I hope that man leaves a legacy of creation, not one of destruction. I don't want to see us destroying the Earth and moving out, destroying the moon, destroying Mars, and then onward to other solar systems and stuff. I don't want us to be that creature. I don't want us to be the creature that other life forms in the universe, fears, because we're the ones that are reaching out. I don't want us to be the ones that developed. I forget what it was in Stargate, where there were those little nanite robot creatures that were trying to devour everything to make more of themselves. And that to me is the getting back to AI and fears of AI is one of the stories I always hear about AI. I've liked is, you design an AI and you give it the job of making a paperclip. And okay, well, you tell it to just make as many paper clips as it can. If you haven't given it enough information, but you tell it to do it any way it can, it might start consuming things and killing things and destroying things to turn that matter into paper clips. Is it the AI's fault? No, it's not the AI's fault. It's actually the original humans' fault for how they programmed it in the first place. So I think that's more the fear sometimes, to me, isn't the fact that the AI might outthink us. It's the fact that we created an AI that we didn't think properly about, and then we're upset with it when it does things, and we were like, oh my God, it's destroying it. It's like, well, that's because we told it to do that, above all else.
Yeah, it's about the parameters, right?
Right. That's where I see a fear, more than just making an AI. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And just calling back the PayPal Mafia AI safety push. Anything that's powerful enough to be rearranging a lot of institutions and marketplaces is powerful enough to create an awful lot of disruption beyond just Amazon displacing a lot of jobs, like open warfare. And it's a little bit strange, right, to say that we have to avoid this because if we don't, corporatists will beat us all with a big stick. But we do have to consider how the marketplace can reasonably adopt these things and in what time frame. In terms of talking about what my former running mate sometimes like to talk about, full automation, the prospects of this, post-monetarism, emerging institutions along these lines. A lot of people, even if these things become viable in terms of the algorithmic protocols that could allow them to begin to exist, people who would be in a position to advance those things might not want to see that happen.
Yeah, I just have to add that Kimberly Forsyth is a really good forward-thinking person, and I want to get her back on the show and talk to her about some of those great ideas, because I didn't hear enough of her during the campaign. I want to hear a lot more about what she has to say, especially about space. We touched on space a little bit, I think she has a lot to say about these new. Her vision is a space vision. It doesn't really. Some of it doesn't translate here on Earth, but some of it definitely. I mean, without her vision, say on Mars or the Moon, I mean, it's going to be very hard to make habitable. Now, I brought up procreation, and you went away from that. But if you think about this realistically, if we have a Moon base or a Mars base, and there are children and there are societies, what happens? Are we going to end up in a bio quarantine zone where these people going to be living differently? Are they going to have different genetic structures, different genetic codes because of the gravity distance as a minimum? They're going to have a different language than us, or are we going to have a universal language like in Star Wars where everyone speaks basic and then they all have their own other language systems? I mean, what's their society going to be like? Is it going to be representational democracy? Is it going to be Earth? President Trump's just going to call up Mars and say, hey, I want you to do this? Or what? I mean, what, like, let's talk about the future society. John Kurtz, go. Think about it.
Well, two things. Talking about people being born on the Moon and Mars and stuff, and in space. Period. I think that talking about transhumanistic things and advances, I think we're going to find that there's going to be technology, medicine, and procedures that are going to be developed because of having to deal with living in space under different conditions that might also help us here on Earth and help us with longevity and help us with diseases. Just because we're going to have to deal with how gravity affects our blood flow differently and worrying about how the brain gets blood flow. And I think that'll help us with things like dementia and Alzheimer's and stuff. But as far as societies, I believe myself eventually that I think whoever lives on the moon and who lives on Mars, they're going to want to have their own governments. I think eventually, originally they're going to start out being like colonies of Earth. And we all know how that works out. It's worked out with many revolutions on this planet. You have a colony and eventually they want to break away because eventually they become so distant from the planet and having different needs that they realize that the mother country or the mother planet at that time doesn't understand their needs. And I think to some extent that's true. So I think you're going to find that eventually the moon will have its own government, Mars will have its own government. The Earth will probably, I envision myself that having people live on the moon and Mars and other planets and elsewhere is probably going to unite people on our planet more, and it'll probably unite our countries more. I would envision, I've said it before, more of a kind of a situation where the UN becomes a governing body of the world, like united countries, and like the United Nations, just like our country itself, the United States, is made up of many different state governments ruled by a federal government. So that's kind of, I envision. I think that's the way it would go. I think eventually they'd be like colonies, but eventually colonies want to break away and be governed by themselves. I don't know how long that would take. How long did it take this country to break away? So, I mean...
10 minutes.
It seems like 10 minutes. How long did it take for your country to break away?
We still haven't broken away.
Not totally, huh?
No, we're still a constitutional. We're still yeah.
I'm just
technically under the
exactly
Queen,
so.
but I mean we're independent. We're technically under the Queen. She's our official, our head of state.
Right, like Canada.
Head of government, head of state, one or the other. Head of government, I think.
I like what you said about universal translation.
I was going to make a joke, Ben. One sec, I've got to make a joke. I don't make many jokes, but John, you said the moon, will probably break away and have its own government. I was just going to say, I don't think so. I think it's going to remain within Earth's orbit. But anyway,
they might become moonies then. They have to shave their heads. I don't know how.
Sorry, Ben, you were talking about something. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, you mentioned a few moments ago universal translation. I'm always drawn to these post-nationalist notions, and this is a science fiction trope that we can point to in a number of things. But the technology to do effectively that, it exists today. I was researching this with somebody else. You can buy there's 10 different languages that you can do this pretty reasonably, where you hang a dongle around your neck and it'll translate your conversation for you. You can also buy a little fishbowl that you put on your head that cancels out the sound, a little PA system that would send the translation out for you then. It's a silly thing, right? But there's a half a dozen border cities in our southern border here in the United States where people could without that kind of uncanny valley reaction, or maybe some kind of vaguely hyper-nationalist reaction to interactions of these kind. We could be having better business dealings and better personal dealings with our fellow man by using this technology in the forms that it may already exist without talking about nanobots in your brains.
All right, Ben. So talk about space societies, moon and Mars colonization. Do you think government? Do you for example? I mean, think about it logically. I mean, you're born on the moon, and the Earth rises. I mean, that's cool. I mean, you got Earth rising instead of the sunrise, right? I mean, you have the sunrise as well, but that's pretty cool. I mean, but what do you think?
It's just the same as on the Earth, you have the moon rise. So there you're on the moon, you have the Earth rise. So.
Yeah, I mean, and we're going to be looking at each other. I mean, that's crazy. But what do you think, Ben? Do you think they're going to break away? Government, society? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a kind of breakaway societies like that. It's difficult. This is potentially multi-trillion-dollar undertaking. I mean, it absolutely is. So it really depends on the state of where we are in Moore's law as to how this kind of thing would happen. And at that point in Moore's law, we also have the potential for actual transnational institutions. And probably at that same time, city-states smart cities, kind of supplanting the nation state. Those kind of a lot of different things kind of happening that move us away from really talking about the United States of space or something, in my view. But
United Federation of Planets. Wait,
right,
we didn't know about that. No.
Right. But the main thing is just how do you get that quadrillion dollars to have a moon country?
Yeah, but that's so you're thinking like a normal lefty. I mean, it's like it's not, sometimes it's not all the government's problem. It's there's a lot of these innovative space companies that are cutting that cost right down. I mean, you got a genius like Elon Musk, and he's, I don't know, he brought they're bringing the payload down to like $10,000 a kilo or less or something. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's they got to get it down to 8,000. I mean, he's almost there. I mean, then it becomes super profitable. I mean, and almost unlimited at that point. I mean, we're almost there. I mean, it's happening.
It's almost kind of a low blow to ding these guys on the Mars thing, because they have done the good work of bringing these rocketry costs down.
Yeah, and they have done. Don't demean
and the private sector, the private sector. Hey, if you're doing it, keep doing it, baby.
Yeah. No, don't demean these guys. These guys have worked hard. I mean, they've built these things at the cost. I mean, Elon Musk especially. He put all his PayPal money into Tesla, and then that went almost broke. And then he stood on the edge of. And this is the thing, okay, it's not a totally private thing. I mean, NASA bailed him out. I mean, NASA gave him a contract, right? And then there's that interaction there between state and private. I mean, without that $3 billion or $2 billion, $1 billion, whatever it was, dollar contract, I mean, Elon Musk would not be anywhere today. So there you go. That's the interaction between state and private. But the state knows that there's efficiencies to be found, cost efficiencies in the private sector, and that's what it does. And I mean, the only problem that I see with that whole interaction is, a company like Lockheed Martin or something like that uses the space programs, the civilian sides, in order to bail itself out on uncompetitive military projects that it uses. So it uses that as a cost washing machine, and I don't like that very much. Everybody knows they do it, but I don't like that. So you get good companies like Firefly, or you get other really good little companies that need cash desperately, that are doing great work, and automatically the only number on speed dial is Lockheed Martin, that sucks. Sorry. Yeah. So
That's fine.
Yeah. So sorry, I was just going off. But,
I mean, we could do a whole show on Pentagon bloat. I don't know how much we want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. All right, but anyway.
Well, see, that's a point I was thinking before about the military going to the moon. I think you're going to have civilians going there to work also, not just military, because of the way that the government works with the different companies like that. So I think there are going to be probably some civilian workers that go along also. I just foresee that happening.
Yeah. And what was the other thing on your list there, Mr. Kirks? What was the other? There was 3, right, or 4?
It was 3. It was just the satellite to watch, supposedly to protect our planet, which could also be used for military reasons. The commerce, and also colonization. Colonization is another thing.
All right, that's cool.
So they are talking about that. So, but yeah, I think that goes along with the business. I mean, and also you think about if the country, or if the planet's going to have enough money to pull away from the Earth. I think it all depends on trade, and also what kind of businesses are going on. We don't know today what businesses might come out of being on the moon and being on Mars. There might be something that we didn't even foresee today.
The moon is easy. The moon is just helium-3. I mean, that's the main one you want. I mean, if America can get helium-3, I mean, a few kilos of that stuff will power the United States for a year. I mean, helium-3 is great stuff. It's and the moon is almost made up of helium-3. So the moon mining, That's easy. That's helium-3. That's why you would build a. I mean, essentially, like, you know, going back to 2004, and it's like, why is Japan building moon-based missile systems? Why are they, you know, building these things that are basically you can't get up there and are defunct? Well, the reason is because they know that by the time they can disassemble these things, transport them, put them on the moon is going to be something, because of helium-3, that's worth defending from other states. And if you're talking about China, or you're talking about Russia, for example, if you can get moon-based missiles and just shoot everything that's coming at you, then you'll have a monopoly on helium-3. I mean, America wins, or whoever wins, right? So you win the energy crisis in 10 minutes. That's the energy crisis. I mean, that's the big game, right? It's helium-3.
Well, I myself just think there might be something we're not seeing right now, which I think is possible. So,
yeah,
you know,
there's
always things we're not seeing at the present that come up, you know, that we see later on. So.
Yeah, and there's also the other issue of space bacteria, bacterial infection. We wonder how life started here on Earth. I mean, we're going to be spanning out and spreading out bacteria all across. We don't know where it might end up going, so we might end up spawning life all over the universe accidentally. I mean, this is how it might have happened before, right? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that's possible. You know,
is that contamination?
You know, we argue, yeah, or just through contamination, or just through us exploring and going out ourselves. I think, you know, it's interesting, you know, you hear that, you know, they think that the Earth is the only place there's life, depending on who you talk to, and then there's other people that say, oh, there must be life all over the place. I do think the universe is too big for us to be the only place with life, but what if we are? And then what if we are the ones that spread out and do bring life to the rest of the universe? I mean, that's a possibility. You don't know. But I think the chances are that there is other life out there, and things could have come to this planet from other planets on comets or meteorites that could have seeded us. I think right now we really don't know. I think the fact that the further out we go and explore more planets, I think the more we will come to understand that ourselves.
Yeah, it's a journey of self-exploration. What do you think, Ben? Do you think it's contamination? Do you think we're going to accidentally?
It's not contamination. I hear this from people a lot. Like, there's this lifeless rock, but it should be regarded as a beautiful entity. We can't have this industrial blight on its face. We're not going to encounter that. And to think that way it's needless aesthetics in my view. But I mean, if we do encounter something beyond microbial life, we obviously have to consider that. But I don't think we will in any realistic time frame. And I think by that point we'll be able to do justice to aesthetics and industrial design beyond our wildest dreams.
Yeah, there's a really good I don't know where to find it, but there's a really good video that shows the amount of habitable worlds. Isaac Arthur, he's the king of the Fermi paradox, but there's a really good time. I'll try and show it one day. There's a really good timeline of habitable worlds that we've discovered since 1993. And it's just so many. I mean, it's just all those planets that are within the Goldilocks zone that basically could harbor microbial life out there. I mean, it doesn't take much. Well, I mean, we've got enough space junk going around, but it doesn't take much to have one piece of bacteria that we accidentally, on a piece of space material that gets frozen and then thrown out and lands on one of these worlds. I mean. It doesn't take much. There's so many of these. There's tens of thousands of these Goldilocks zone planets out there. That's potentially habitable for humans. I see us if we can survive this, and I guess this is the theme we'll end on. If we can survive this and grow and do this correctly. we will become a spacefaring species that will probably just perpetually explore and perpetually colonize at least what our galaxy, right? Our own galaxy. I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, do you guys see problems with that?
I would hope for that.
Yeah. I'm quite hopeful in that regard also. Yes.
Yeah. Do you guys see an issue with that? Imagine, okay, hypothetically, we're the only ones. There's no alien life. I mean, if it was a human-centric galaxy, I mean, is there moral consequences of that? Because once we get to the moon and once we get to Mars, everything's open. Then it's all open. It's all finished.
This is the ultimate transhumanist question in a lot of ways. Talking about AI safety, talking about moving beyond so many things in terms of takeoff theories. There is a sense in which all things that we have held dear to as human beings could be shed, and that's a prospect that we just have to work through in our own good time, and it might not be such a long time. You know, if 1,000 years of history is happening in 1 year, as Ray Kurzweil believes, we're going to have to be on top of it. But yeah, I think that some nostalgic or aesthetic notions are going to be things that we're going to have to try to tamp down a little bit and try to just address the actual.
The other argument is the Charlie Cam argument, which says all of this space talk is absolute nonsense. He doesn't like it. He doesn't entertain it. He doesn't think it's good because he just thinks that once the singularity hits, humans go defunct and you become cyborgs or whatever, and that's it. I mean, what's the point of going out and what's the point of perpetually doing anything as humans? Because singularity, mind uploading, cyborgism, maybe we do become nanobots. I mean, it's all open from there, and he says, what's the point? I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I don't agree with that.
I still think we'd want to expand. I don't think it matters what form we're in, we're going to still want to expand.
I want to call back a kind of notion of the sort of humanistic blind spot that I spoke of a few months ago to talk again about AI and advanced algorithm development, because something that was talked about a few times on the Alex Jones program, in fact. But there's a very real sense in which this overly humanistic worldview is affecting how we are putting money into real R&D for advanced algorithms. We're focusing on creating some beautiful thing in our image, something that has qualia. And I'm not entirely convinced that qualia and consciousness is actually a thing. And I'm quite convinced that taking this approach is not the best use of resources. When, as I mentioned, the InfoWar kind of piece, a little bit of a lurid kind of piece, but it was a piece that described a government program for predictive algorithms. And predictive algorithms, maybe it's not as sexy as a robot friend, but it is the kind of thing that might keep us away from any number of existential risks in a way that spending money on your robot friend will not. But again, we have to kind of get beyond some of our ideas of what is beautiful or what is human. We at least have to be able to entertain some of these notions and think a little bit more about outcomes.
So I've just cut off all our heads because I'm showing that video now from earthsky.com, and basically this is the amount of exoplanets that they've discovered since the 1990s. This won't go on for very long. But this just gives you I think this is Hubble, or this is just one of those Earth, or maybe it's just an Earth-based telescope. But essentially every little dot that you see on the screen there is an exoplanet that's been discovered since 1990s. Actually, let me, oh God, let me quickly show you here. This is the amount of exoplanets going up. So yeah, so this is the amount of exoplanets. So and that is the map of the exoplanets. So 4,003 exoplanets discovered so far, and basically that huge cluster up there. Yeah, I mean that's that. I mean that's potentially habitable exoplanets. So, I mean, we're talking about that's going back just a little bit, but going back to that, I mean that's the amount of potential just within our eyesight. Just within our primitive telescope technology. I mean that's it. So the potential is there. I mean, these are important debates. The Charlie Cam versus the world debate. It's kind of interesting. Greg Kurzweil as well over there talking about it. But anyway, hey, look, thanks very much for coming on. I mean, I want to give you final comments to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about it before we go. But I love this. I just love this topic. I just get enthralled. I think it's so much fun. And we have the ability to basically do this, but the window is narrow and the window is short, I think, depending on existential crises that are abounding, and it's up to the Transhumanist Party to lead the way on these issues. We are, that party is the moral compass. It's the light. It's the torch. It's the light that has to be the guiding force on a lot of the philosophical, moral, ethical, and other principles. That's what it's set up to be. That's what it's set up to do. And these other people, they can do what they want, improving the technology or whatever. But the party needs to guide people. I think that's what it is. That's what it's for. The potential. All these doors are open. John, Ben, actually, we'll start on you. What's your final comments? What's your final thoughts? Tell us what you're feeling. Are you feeling excited as I am? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say what I've said before, and just kind of add an additional statement that the Futurist New Deal for America it's designed to set the stage for a society that's fully digitalized, a society that can sustain a full automation, and with these stopgap measures in terms of humane economic policy, that's an important stepping stone. And then we can be moving into an advanced algorithm-run TechNate. We can be moving into maybe far more decentralized institutions that would themselves allow us to be moving off-world in relatively short order. We need to do whatever those institutions look like. We need to be pressing forward and seeing that this is done because we do have there is a ticking clock, as you mentioned.
Thank you. And John, what do you have to say? I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but what do you have to say?
Well, just like was said about the futuristic New Deal, I believe in the concept of the New Deal ones that are out there. I like the Democrats' Green New Deal, and I like my version is basically an altered Green New Deal. So I do believe very much in the backbone of the concept of a New Deal. I do think something that we talked about before about was said if we move towards being robots, it doesn't matter. But I think even if something as far as our next step in man, I think it would still have our desire to explore and expand. I think that would go on as what's part of us that moves along with that. So therefore, I do think no matter what form we are in, that we're going to probably want to explore and be out there. As far, I'm sorry.
Hey, we have some breaking news on the election.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that in just a sec. But just talking about this notion of augmented humans and whatever. There are a lot of people out there, even within the transhuman community, that want to stay biological beings. They want to stay as pretty much as the form they are now because they think that that's a great sort of form. I mean, they wouldn't mind being augmented a little bit so you didn't have back problems and maybe better eyesight and stuff. But I mean, they're pretty happy with being what they are. I mean, not everyone wants to become a robot, right?
Well, I mean, I have a bunch of fake parts of me, and I'd prefer to have real parts because the real parts at this point in the game still work better than the artificial parts. Although I would like to be able to tap into the database and stuff, and I have to look at my my phone to get things. I'd like to just think, hey Google. It'd be kind of nice if in your head you could say, hey Google, and you could have the information come right to you. That would be really nice. I would like that, but I do like the human form. I like very much the points they made talking about science fiction. I've said this before in the last version of Battlestar Galactica, where the Cylons evolved back into synthetic human beings to the point where they actually had children with actual human beings, and then they actually seeded the Earth. So you find out that the Earth is actually what we had considered a robot-human hybrid, but it didn't really matter anymore because the robots came to understand the human machine as an advanced technology. And it was kind of an interesting, it went from humans designing machines, machines becoming AI and going off on their own, only to evolve themselves back into basically human beings again anyhow. So that
always made me sad. The sort of immortalist goal is achieved, and then there's some atavistic effect because of the loss of that knowledge. That makes me a little sad.
Well, it's so interesting because I just had a quick look because I don't know the Bible off by heart, but it says here in Genesis 1:27, but the thing won't let me scroll down. But it says here essentially in the New International Version of, so God created mankind in his own image. I mean, the image of God, he created them. I mean, not trying to bring theology into this, but I mean, his own image. I mean, isn't that a biological human? Isn't that just like a mirror? Isn't that what it?
Well, I guess the argument to that, you can't be sure, is the human form the ideal form? Was he talking about man in a physical form? Was he talking about man in a spiritual form? Could you consider the spiritual form an energy form? I mean,
this is the problem with the Bible. It's written by God, and yet there's so many aloof, statements. But I mean, if you're talking in a physical form, I mean, you're talking about a biological being. But like you were saying, there's so many other ways you could read that, and that's the whole problem with the Bible. I mean, oh God. But yeah, all right. Breaking news. Crossing over to our correspondent in Transhuman headquarters, Ben Zion, correspondent Ben Zion. What's going on? Breaking news.
Yes. So there's just been an adjustment to the quorum for the. I'm only learning about this. There's just been an adjustment to the quorum for the voting requirement, down to 31.3% of existing membership. This is because of concerns about apparently because of concerns about election security generally, and the continuing a longer range there.
What percentage are we at right now?
We're quite close to that. We need so we would need an additional 38 votes or 30 odd votes at this point to reach that quorum. It seems.
Wow, it's all
so
coming.
We might find out tomorrow.
It seems quite likely. Yes.
All right. Well, history is being made here at Detonation. So that's very good. Thank you, correspondent Ben Zion. Now you can go back to being candidate Ben Zion. Thanks for that update.
Like I said earlier, some elections only have 30% people vote, and that's the election. So that's not an outrageous number.
Yeah,
it's quite commonplace in this country, sadly.
Yes.
Yeah, in America, it's not compulsory voting. I mean, here in Australia, it's compulsory voting. You get a massive fine,
that's interesting.
Voter turnout is double as a result. That's not a bad thing.
Voter turnout is about 99%. It's very high because people don't want to get fined. I mean, there's multiple ways you can vote online. Not online, but like via mail, and you can go to the booths. The booths are mainly the one. The mail is usually for people who are out of the country or early voting. They've been mucking around with early voting, and that seems to be very good because people can choose their times as opposed to years and years and years. It was on a set day, so on Saturday you will turn up, and voter turnout was a little bit lower on those required days, but now they have early voting, and where people can choose. So people go, oh, I'm finishing work on a Friday afternoon. I'll shoot off to the voting booth, do it, and then go on my weekend. And that's main reason was why voter turnout wasn't so good is because, people would go away to their holiday house on the weekend and they wouldn't be near their location and stuff like that. So they're adjusting that, and voting is getting better. I don't know if that helps, if compulsory voting helps or whatever, but
doesn't hurt.
it's something to think about. It's a way.
That would be interesting, yeah.
People in this country who would resist a full representative governance because reasons, again, the kind of corporatist useful idiots who would say this sort of thing to my thinking. But people have a lot of reasons why they want to be free, but not actually really have a society that's functioning.
Well, I always thought if you don't vote, you can't complain. Well, it's like, what's the point? What's the point of having, especially with a ranked democracy? I think it's a great system. It works really great here in Australia. We have a very sophisticated society because of ranked voting, because it goes across all the issues. You don't end up with this Trump-Hillary thing where you're like, oh man, I have to vote for one of them because if I vote for the third party, it's going to be a wasted vote. We don't have that. It doesn't exist. So you literally vote who you like, who's best on policy, who's best in your area, and you end up with a very efficient system. I mean, we live in one of the most egalitarian, I think we're the richest people on the planet now. I mean, we're in a great shape. And a lot of it's down to the way we run our democracy.
I think a lot of people in this country don't vote because then when something goes bad, they can say, "Well, I didn't vote for him." So I think that it's a
status symbol.
It's the way they do it safe, and then they can complain about it. They can complain because it's also easier to sit back and do nothing and complain than to actually do something.
Yeah. And it's a learned helplessness.
That's true.
Because we don't have a system where one person equals one vote. Effectively, we have a system where corporate speech equals 4,000 votes to your one vote. So there's it's not simply just that those people are unconcerned. It's that they've been conditioned to feel that they can't do it.
All right. So to end on the space theme, I guess I'll ask you a supplementary question. Do you think that any of these issues, let's say space colonization, do you think the world should have a vote on that? Say at the United Nations, should they, all the delegates sit down and say, is space colonization moral? And they all should put their hands up. I mean, is that something that should happen? John, go, yes or no?
Well, I think it's something that I don't know about the moralness. I never really thought of it being immoral. I think it depends on how we do it, but I think it's something that's in man's nature to want to spread out and colonize things. I think it is in our blood to want to explore, and I do think that is the next step for man, to reach to the moon and to reach to Mars. I couldn't. In my eyes, I find it hard to believe we haven't continued. Not the reason that should we. So that's kind of where I look at it.
What about you, Ben? Do you reckon they should have a vote on it at the United Nations and say, is it moral, yes or no?
It really depends what you're talking about. I mean, think of all the things that you can do in international waters. 99% of that stuff is pretty well regarded as within the Geneva Convention. I would say probably in realistic terms, for most things, you don't need to have that vote. But the international cooperation is a good starting place.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on this great episode of Detonation. They're getting really good now. We're back into a more normal interview style. We got fun topics. That was a fun topic. And I want, as I said, Mr. Kurtz, if I can get Jane on, I'll bring you on for that one.
Yes, I'd be interested. Thank you.
She's awesome. She's done a lot of really cool stuff. Living in that biosphere for however a year or two or whatever it was incredible. And that biosphere project is set up so that they can explore the validity of how biomes work. But also for Mars. I mean, for how to build a habitat on Mars and how to have a sustainable food source, and how the psychology dynamics of, because it's interesting in that experiment that they sent in a whole bunch of people 12 people or however many went in, and almost immediately, within a month or two, they split off into two camps. I mean, they like tribal camps. There was 2 or 3 people who went one way, and all the other people went the other way, and they didn't interact with each other, and they had a little war thing going on from almost the very start. The psychology at play was intense, and I mean, even though they were trained and they sat around and sang Kumbaya every other minute, just the amount of lack of space. I mean, eventually it got to everybody, and also the other thing is that really interesting. Jane, she shows photos of where she turned orange. They all started to turn dramatically orange in the skin because of the amount of sweet potatoes that they were consuming. Because sweet potatoes, they were growing tons of this sort of stuff, and the vegetables were doing really, really well, but the sweet potatoes really took off, and because they're kind of starved a little bit, they were eating so many sweet potatoes, these people were turning orange. And they weren't getting enough vitamins, and then you had they didn't really go vegan, but they found killing the chickens and the goats, they found that really tough. I mean, they found that sort of, because out in the world, mass consumables, meat and all that, and then actually all the chicken that they named, they shouldn't have named it, but they name it, be full friends with it, then they have to eat it because you're getting malnourished on certain minerals and vitamins and things. I mean, this project was absolutely amazing, and she's full on with it, going to space, building these space things. So yeah, absolutely. And when she got out, she went to the supermarket, and she went into a sort of PTSD with the amount of choices that she had. It's just incredible. The whole thing, you've got to check it out. Jane Pontier, very, very
I know
cool.
they're doing other similar things that are smaller and for shorter periods of time with only like 4 people and stuff, and so they are doing a lot of that to see how people can deal with that being stuck together and for long periods of time and stuff. So it is very interesting.
Very interesting. All right, thank you very much for coming on. Oh, sorry, what Ben, you saying something?
Well, just that we should consider in undertakings of this kind, with any kind of small closed system, that you're going to see these kind of Phillips and Bardo, the rather infamous psychological experimentation guy, effects. People, what you talked about, people getting into little camps and fighting, Lord of the Flies type stuff. That's we have to. It informs a lot of things in terms of
human nature.
Yeah.
I like you guys, but I don't know how sitting around with you in a biosphere for 2 years, I don't know how that would how that would play on my own psychology. All right, thank you very much for coming on this episode of Detonation. That was fun. That was great. Space is a great topic. There's so much you can talk about, and all more coming to you all this week. Kurtz and Ben Zion, thank you for being great guests. And if you missed
thank you both for having me.
There's breaking news somewhere in this episode. Go and find that about the USTP, and we'll have a candidate announcement really soon, I think. But let's all work together and let's fall in line, and we can really make this into something really, really, really special. I am looking forward to making this something that is tangible and workable and consume. We can make it something that the population can consume, and that our ideas will get out there, and it will become something historic. I think we can do this. I really do, and I'm really positive about it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.